Welcome to Jewish Wisdom on JTV, the global Jewish channel. Well, today we're talking about fashion culture, the sexualisation of culture and body image issues that surround that. We're joined by a panel of experts in very different fields. We've got Laura Grabiner, who is a fashion writer. She works for Grazia, but she's also spent some time at the Telegraph and at Vogue. I'm actually a bit of a fashion expert myself, so you better watch out. Sarah Proops is also joining us, who is a highly sought after Jewish educator. So, I mean, I imagine you guys are going to have different perspectives on the issues we discussed today. But, I mean, I really want to start by talking about an issue which, I know that everyone that was watching this, it's affected them in some way, which is the issue of sort of body image, self-esteem, the way we put ourselves across the world, especially on social media. We've got a real problem here on our hands where society is focusing a great deal and valuing people a great deal on the way they look. Laura, obviously you work in the fashion industry. I mean, recently there was an issue on Facebook, I know, where they banned an image of a model who was a plus size, and they said it was on grounds that because it would be encouraging an unhealthy lifestyle to say that to be overweight is okay. Now, you can argue either way on that, but there's other issues of Abercrombie, other sort of fashion outlets where they won't have they're very, very selective in who they'll use, even to work in their stores.
Firstly, touching on your point about, think brands like Abercrombie or whatever, ultimately these brands are businesses. They want to sell clothes, they want to sell merchandise. When they create a campaign, they are building something that consumers want to buy into. And we know that, young people, old people want to buy into kind of aspirational brands. That's a branding thing. I think it depends what you're talking about in terms of fashion. I think that, there is an element of kind of models on the catwalk being very thin, but, you could also argue that, when I go to fashion shows, I'm there to see the creations of designers, that they work incredibly hard all year to produce these collections and collections. And, I am there to look at the clothes. I'm not looking at the girl who's in them. I'm seeing what's going to be the trend next season, how we could make it work for our readers, how we could make it affordable for our readers. For me, it's not about the body and the clothes, and we, I'm writing for consumers who don't look like that,
Right. So you think that there's a difference between fashion and body image, and that's the way that you reconcile this?
And obviously they're two majorly different things. I don't think that fashion is not compatible with a real woman who doesn't look like Cindy Crawford.
Okay, so Sarah, I mean, you've been listening to this. What's your take on this? Do you think that we have an issue with fashion culture? Do you think there's a sense at which it can be something that's, fashion is something that can be very positive, empowering? Is there a place for it? And what are the key issues that you think need to be resolved?
I think there's definitely a place to express yourself through what you wear. But as Laura was saying, on the catwalk, when the model is displaying clothes, you mentioned that you didn't look at her, you were looking at the clothing. But that's the way a lot of people look at these models. They're not people, they're mannequins displaying the item, and that is really troubling to me. Because our girls and our boys and men and women are looking at the fashion industry and at the clothing, but they can't help but look at the people that are modelling them. And with that comes aspirations to look that way and look for partners that way. And the product of that is really low self-esteem and pressure to look a certain way. And even more so, which then leads to an unhealthy relationship with food and with their own bodies. So yes, I agree that fashion is an amazing way to express yourself. Each of us choose what we wear every day. We look in the mirror and think, this is what the world's going to see me as. But with that, obviously, within the fashion industry comes a tremendous responsibility that the whole world's watching. people of all ages aspiring in different ways to replicate what's being put across.
I mean, one of the things that I think is worth pointing out is that, you know, we're talking about a difference between body image and fashion culture, or fashion, the clothes that you wear. But actually, one of the things that seems to be happening over the decades is that skin exposure, like the lack of clothing that we're wearing, is sort of becoming greater and greater. And actually, for younger and younger ages, it's becoming more and more appropriate. You know, there's a real issue around kids becoming sexualized at a younger age. What's your take on? Do you think is this a bad thing or a good thing that it's sort of becoming less and less?
I think it's a really fascinating topic. And when we look back in fashion history, when the bikini debuted by Louis Reynard, who was...
When was that?
It was in 1946, I think.
That is amazing knowledge.
Thank you. He was an engineer and he worked in his mother's lingerie shop. And it was the first swimwear item to expose the belly button. Actually, what defined it as a bikini is that I had to fit through a ring, an engagement ring that someone was wearing, a wedding ring, that size band, that would define it. And what was so crazy is a few things. Firstly, it was named after the site of the testing of the atomic bomb in that year. So that was called Bikini et al., and therefore the name of the bikini arrived because it knew the magnitude of the effect that the bikini would have on the world. The exposure of a belly button in swimwear was going to be massive, and he wasn't wrong. To the extent that they approached French models, it was in France, to debut this swimwear garment, and none of them would do it. They were mortified. So the woman that debuted the bikini was in fact a stripper.
Wow.
And what's crazy now is the social norm is bikinis and exposure of belly buttons, and that's the default swimwear. Whereas not so long ago, it was compared to the atomic bomb being dropped on the fashion industry. So it's a really fascinating way to see how much fashion has progressed and how things have become a lot more acceptable. It's a scary time to think what could be in a number of years' time.
Sure, but my question is, what do you think it should be the limits of the kind of skin exposure which becomes the norm that people are seeing on, adverts and banners, and do you think there is a limit to this, and do you think there is a line that shouldn't be crossed?
No.
You think there's no line that should be crossed?
Well, what do you mean by line? I mean, I think like...
What I mean is, what should be seen on public view in areas of life that, everyone can access.
I don't think that kids should be involved in, campaigns or advertising where they are seen in any way that could be seen as sexualised. I, of course, don't think that's appropriate. I think that it's good to have things that encourage discussion in the public sphere. I think it comes down to respect. There are obviously places, workplaces or places of religious worship where it's inappropriate. You wouldn't turn up in a bikini. It really would be like the atomic bomb. It's inappropriate.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that, it's not... If I were to walk down the road in a miniskirt, it's not physically affecting someone else's life. I wouldn't do that in a school because it's not appropriate.
Fine. Okay, so Sarah, picking up on this, Laura thinks that as long as you have the right time and the right place, there shouldn't really be limits on skin exposure.
Apart from with children, you said.
Apart from children, and that's a topic in and of itself, which we can maybe get onto another time. What's your take on this?
I think we live in a society where, with social media, especially, like we touched upon before, everyone's very aware and there's a pressure to take the perfect selfie and to put yourself across in a certain way, wearing clothes and not wearing clothes, in swimwear and in your outfit of the day. And I think it is exceptionally damaging for ourselves, our own self-esteem and the society around us. However, I think it's one of those things where we need to stress to ourselves and those around us and our families and our communities that, of course, it's important what you look like, but what's equally as important, if not more, is who you are as a person, what you value. Do you honour your parents? Do you give charity? Are you a good person? Whereas the fashion industry, by definition, you don't interview the models as they walk down the runway. It's a fashion industry. It's judged by the exterior.
Sadly, I suppose that there's a market for all of this. the fact is that magazines sell because often there is something on the cover that says, well, look at this fat girl and look at this thin girl. Yeah. That's not a good thing, but there's a reason why it's on the cover. Yeah. It's because it shifts magazines. Yeah. I think something interesting that Sarah said earlier was education. I think that's a massive part of, teaching kids and young people about it. I know that there has been work done in terms of high fashion magazines to explain to young girls in particular that, when they open a magazine and see a fashion shoot or a story, there's been so much work that's gone into it. There's, makeup artists, there's hairstylists, there's,
not real.
There's retouching. It's not so much that it's not real, it's that it should be seen as a story. It should be seen as something aesthetic, a platform on which to show clothes and fashion and trends. The girl in the magazine, she's there doing a job as well, and I think that she does not look like that when she turns up on set, trust me. So she's beautiful, but she doesn't look like that.
Right. So as a fashion writer, what's your message, Laura, to a girl, a teenager watching this at home, and she really is concerned about her, the image that she gives across to people externally. What's your message?
I think my message is first of all that, I do work in fashion, I love what I do, but I'm not saving the world. In fact, in terms of giving back to society, Sarah does a much more important job than I do. And I think that fashion should be enjoyed as a kind of, as you would hobbies or anything like that. I think that they need to bear in mind that there are things that are more important, their education, their friends, their relationships with their families, and, not everything you read should be, or that you watch on TV or see on the computer should be taken to heart. We're all kind of individuals just like making our way, and I don't necessarily think that what we portray as an industry is something that people should stringently live by. And it's something to be enjoyed in your own way.
Sarah, you're obviously a Jewish educator. As a Jewish educator, listening to the discussion we've had, what would be the Jewish voice in this discussion?
So, obviously, we've been talking about skin exposure and the way we dress. So, what screams out is modesty, is tzniut. I think in today's generation, more than ever, it is so vital for us to understand that, and which is highlighted through the halachot, the Jewish laws, that there's so much more to us. And when there is more skin coverage, it creates that boundary, whether conscious or subconscious, that yes, I have to look good and I have to feel good in my own skin and feel confident with that, but that's only to a certain extent, and there's a lot more to me than what I look like. It's who I am, what a good person I am, how I look after my friends and treat my parents and conduct myself. And modesty has lots of connotations, specifically to women, even though it's not. Men have modesty laws too. It's not just in the way we dress, it's the way we behave and how we treat money. It's really quite wide. But I think in today's day and age, even more so than ever, when we're so consumed with the way we look and getting however many likes on Instagram and on Facebook, and we're so craving for everyone's approval. It's so important for us to understand, and I think through the laws of modesty, whether conscious or unconscious, it's telling us, yes, that's important, and yes, you need to feel good in yourself, but there's so much more to us.
Great, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Jewish Wisdom at JTV.